guys, welcome back to the channel. This is Remy from Do and Learn. So today we'll be learning about data types and variables in Java. So let's get started. So data types represent the type of data that can be stored and processed in Java programming. Basically, data types are of two major categories. One is primitive data types, like what you see on the screen, and this is also called as predefined data types, which are present in Java. And the other type is non-primitive or user-defined. Class is a good example of non-primitive data types, but in this video we'll focus on these primitive data types, or which are already available with us. So we have four major categories in primitive data types. The first category is integers. So these stores numbers, especially whole numbers like fully formed numbers. And the second one is floating point numbers, which is the second category, which stores fractional numbers. And the third major category is character, which stores single characters. And the fourth major category is Boolean, which stores just two values, either true or false. So speaking about integers, we have four subcategories under that. The first one is a byte. So the maximum length is 8 bits here. And I've just given an example along with the syntax here. So the data type is byte, exists variable, and it can store like 23. And next comes the short, which is just before integer but after byte, I mean in length. So short occupies 16 bits of memory location. So this is an example, and the maximum number that can be stored here is 31,567, both in the positive and the negative part. Then we have the integer, which is 32 bits, and as you can see on the screen, that's a huge number. And even if you have longer numbers or lengthier numbers than that, you can directly go to long. So long is the highest integer data type that is supported by Java. Then moving on to the fractional part, we have just two types there. One is float and double. So they are really long, and E represents the exponential value. So it is like 3.4 into 10 power 38 to the positive as well as negative. So that's the value for float, and it occupies 32 bits, and double occupies 64 bits. So comparing the lengths, integer can be compared with float because both of them occupy 32 bits. Whereas long can be compared with double. And then character data type occupies 8 bits. It's more or less same as byte, but the value that is stored there, it's totally different because a byte is different from a character. Then we have a Boolean data type, which just takes 1 bit because either it's 1 or 0. Based on that, we'll be getting true or false. So I have a small example. The class name is third. Just like that, I've named it, so no need to worry about it. So this is the class which holds my main function. So as you have seen in your previous programs, main function is the core function which starts my program, or this is where your program starts executing. So the main function should be present inside a class. The class name should be same as the program's name. So that's what we have done here. So initially what we have done, we have printed just 2 lines of code, program to calculate distance covered in travel and so blah blah blah, and then I have declared I've declared totally 5 variables here. So the first variable is of integer data type, the second and third variable is also of integer data type. But then I come to the next data, that is distance. It's again another variable, but I have this as long because I know that when I multiply this speed and time, I might exceed the length of that number, that is the outcome of this multiplication. So I just foresee that, and I have my data type for distance as long. Then I am going to calculate the total distance for like how much distance is traveled by this person for a week or a month. So that is going to be a huge number again. So again, I want that to be a long. So just we will try to execute this, and then you can understand the output. Okay, so the program name is third.java. Let me execute that. Let me compile it. Okay, there is no compilation error. Good for me. Let me go for execution. Hooray, that's it. We got the answer. So it says that program to calculate distance covered in travel so and so, and finally the distance traveled is 9600, and the total distance covered is like, it's a huge number. You can read it out. So ultimately the point here is we have 4 major data categories under your primitive data types. One is integer, next one is character, then we have floating point numbers, and finally we have Boolean. So you can just work on with this and try to create some programs with all these data types, and you can understand it better. So moving further, Let's try to understand what is a variable. A variable is the basic unit of storage in a Java program. Actually, variable is a element which stores each and every data that we pass inside your program. So without variables, there is no programming stuff itself. So variables have got their own visibility. So where you create, where you apply it, where you delete it, and they have their own lifetime. So syntax for a variable is that you type and give the data type of that variable, write the variable name, and then if you want, you can assign a value or just you can leave it. So in Java, if you just leave it without assigning a value, it takes a default value which is null or zero. When you go for integer, it is zero. When you go for string, it's a null. So here we have certain examples for variables. So the first variable what I've defined here is long, which is again comes under integer category. So we can assign a value like this. Then I have a variable called as last name, which is of character data type. I'm just storing character M. So please be clear here, when we try to store a single character, we have to use single quotes. Whereas when we use integer or any other number, there is no need for us to use quotes. But when we have the string or character data type, we need to give some quotes here. And this is another way of just declaring variables. So this is how we define variable. So declaration and definition are two different things. So declaration just creates memory. Definition will assign values to them. And we have certain limitations for them. Your variable name could be anything, but the one of the major limitations is that it should not start with a number or any other special symbol apart from underscore. So underscore is allowed. You can create a variable name starting with underscore, and we can have a combination of characters and numbers, but not special symbols. So any variable name cannot start with a number. So either it has to start with a character or it has to start with an underscore. So there are some additional facts about variable. So once we are done with it, we'll go to a simple program and we will check out how variable works. So here we have a concept called as automatic typecasting. So let's say I have a variable which is highlighted just now, a variable of byte type, and we give a value of 20, and then we assign that byte to an integer. Since integer takes a larger memory than byte, this assignment is always accepted by the compiler and it is done automatically for you. So this is what we call it as automatic typecasting. So where a byte type is casted to an integer type. Whereas if you do the reverse process, let's take another example. Just I have a variable integer a, I'm assigning a value 50. Now if I want to assign this a to a byte, then that's not possible. I'm trying to reduce the memory size because byte carries a lower memory compared to an integer. So if you want to go for it, then you can explicitly cast that. And this is how you explicitly cast it. You just put the data type within brackets and use that variable on the right hand side. So automatically the integer can be stored inside a byte. So that's how casting happens in your Java programming. Then we have automatic type promotion. For example, if you take the below code, so I have 3 different variables which are of byte category. Then what I do, I just multiply them and do some mathematical operation. My compiler foresees this operation and it knows that the outcome of this multiplication division might lead my numbers, that the byte numbers, to exceed the memory location. So it automatically promotes them from byte to integer. So that's what is happening here. So I can just, when I have an assignment statement int d followed by a into b by c. So this a into b by c, which are of byte types, is automatically promoted to integer type and then it is stored there. As you can see on the last line here, there is promotion rules. If you are assigning float variable to double, automatic promotion is done. If you are doing long variable to float, that is done. But if I am trying to assign a double to float, that doesn't happen. If I assign a double to long, then that never happens. So we will take a small example here. So let's define a small class and let me save it as sample2.java. Okay, let me call this class name as sample2. We will create a main function. Okay, now inside your main function, let's create some variables. Let me create a variable x and y which are of integer types, and let's create a byte type, some byte c. Okay, and D. Let me create a character type. Now let me create a Boolean. So let's assign some values. Let me give value of 20 and let y be 70 into x, and then let's have byte values like 36. Okay, then let me have d is equal to 5 into 36, or let me put a smaller number because bytes maximum value is 127, as you know that. So let me put it like 23. Okay, now what we can do is we can print these values and check whether they are properly formed. The integer x is, let me add that variable here. So let me print the value of y, and let's print the value of c. Let's try to print the value of d. And after printing this, let's try to store the value of these integers. And sorry, I'll create a new variable. Let's call it as v. I'm going to multiply my byte just to show you that this byte is automatically casted to integers. So now we can print the value of v, which is again a multiplied value of these integers. And then finally we can store some value in. Okay, as I told you, it's a Boolean variable. So let me just print that value of Boolean variable. Okay, b. That's it. Let's try to compile this. So the program's name is sample2.java. Okay, it doesn't carry any errors with it, so directly we'll go for execution. Wow, so as you can see, the integer is 20, integer y is x into some value. That's what we gave. That's 1400. Byte c and d is fine, and integer v is a multiplied value of bytes. As you can see, you can get the result there, and finally the value of Boolean. So that's it about variables and data types here. This is a very simple concept. So then and there, when you use a lot of data types, you'll get used to it. Try using a lot of data types and different data types wherever possible in your program. If you like this video, please like, share, and comment on it, as well as subscribe to our channel. So we'll meet you in the next video. Thank you.